What if everything you believed about the royal family, the elegance, the duty, the perfect father-son bond between King Charles and Prince William, was built on a secret so dark it could tear the monarchy apart? What if a single envelope, containing nothing more than a few strands of DNA, carried the power to rewrite royal history forever? It started quietly. No royal press conference, no palace statement. Just a sealed envelope slipped into a courier's hands late one Friday evening under the name, "For William's Eyes Only." Inside, according to a palace insider, lay evidence so shocking that it sent the future King of England into a rage so uncontrollable, the echoes of his screams reached the marble corridors of Buckingham Palace. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine it, Prince William, the man groomed from birth to wear the crown, staring down at a document that told him the one truth he was never meant to see. A truth that didn't just question his father's legitimacy, but his own bloodline. You can almost feel the chill in the air that night at Kensington Palace. The staff whispered that he looked pale, frozen, as if the ground beneath him had given way. And perhaps, in a way, it had. Because this wasn't just about lineage. It was about betrayal, trust, and a lifetime of lies wrapped in royal gold. But before we go deeper into what was inside that envelope, let's rewind for a moment. For decades, the world has watched Prince William embody everything a monarch should be: disciplined, devoted, dignified. The perfect heir. The model of what the monarchy hoped to project after the turmoil of his parents' marriage. We saw him smile through grief, marry the woman the world adores, raise 3 beautiful children, and prepare quietly for the day he'd take the throne. But behind the smiles, there were questions. Questions the palace never wanted the public, or perhaps even William himself, to ask. Why were certain details of his birth so heavily protected? Why did Diana, before her death, hint cryptically in her private notes that the truth will shock them all? Why was there a private medical file that disappeared from St. Mary's Hospital weeks after William was born? For years, royal watchers dismissed these things as conspiracy theories, just tabloid chatter. But then came the leak. The medical document. The DNA envelope. Now the palace can no longer dismiss what's been unearthed. You see, royal lineage isn't just family business. It's constitutional law. The crown depends on blood legitimacy. One wrong strand, one wrong truth, could collapse centuries of tradition. That's why this discovery isn't just a scandal. It's a national crisis disguised as a family matter. So why now? Why, after decades of silence, would something like this surface? Was it revenge? Was it protection? Or was it fate finally catching up to a family that has spent generations guarding secrets behind palace gates? Sources close to the royal household say it began with an internal audit of medical archives. Routine, supposedly. But one name kept reappearing in red ink: Project Phoenix. No one seemed to know what it meant, except for a handful of senior officials sworn to secrecy. Then came whispers that Prince William's DNA had been compared against 2 royal bloodlines, and the results didn't match one of them. Think about that for a second. The man destined to be king, his entire identity, his entire future, suddenly thrown into question by a test he never asked for. A test that someone, somewhere, wanted him to see. But here's the part that chills even the most loyal royal insiders. This wasn't the first time the question of William's paternity had been quietly raised. Long before this discovery, long before the DNA comparisons, there had been hushed conversations within palace walls. Conversations about Diana, about her loneliness, and about a man whose name she carried in her heart long after his death. Barry Mannicky. He was Diana's bodyguard, her protector, some say her true confidant. And for years, rumors swirled that their connection went beyond the professional. That in the darkest days of her marriage, when she felt abandoned and trapped, Mannicky was the only person who truly saw her. Diana once said in an interview, "I adored him. I was devastated when he died." Those words haunted Charles, and they never truly left William either. But what if there was more behind that devotion than anyone realized? The palace always denied it, of course. The official line was that Diana's relationship with Mannicky was platonic. Yet when Mannicky was suddenly killed in a motorcycle accident in 1987, an accident that investigators later called mysterious at best, Diana reportedly told a friend, "They killed him." He was the one person I loved. Fast forward to today, and those whispers, those suspicions, may have found physical proof. DNA that links William not to King Charles, but to someone else entirely. Now, here's the emotional twist. This isn't just a matter of politics or royal image. This is a son's entire sense of identity being ripped apart. Because William never questioned his father. Not once. He stood by him during the worst public scandals. He defended him when others mocked the monarchy. And in return, he believed Charles loved him unconditionally. But that night, when the test results were opened, everything shattered. Imagine being in his place, finding out your father may not be your father, and realizing your entire destiny might be built on someone else's name. Imagine the humiliation, the disbelief, the grief. The man he called father might have been the very man who concealed the truth from him. And that's exactly what insiders say triggered William's outburst inside Balmoral Castle. Witnesses describe hearing shouting. Raw, emotional, heartbroken. "You lied to me. All of you did," he reportedly screamed. It wasn't the anger of a prince. It was the cry of a son betrayed. What could push a future king to that point? What could make the calm, composed Prince William lose control in front of his father and the palace staff? The answer lies in that envelope, and the name written at the bottom of the DNA report. But before we reach that moment of explosion, it's important to understand the stakes. Because this isn't just about William and Charles. It's about what this means for the crown itself. If William isn't King Charles's biological son, then what happens to the line of succession? Does Prince George's claim to the throne remain valid? Does the monarchy risk a constitutional collapse? British law, steeped in centuries of royal precedent, doesn't easily bend for emotional truths. The crown is passed through legitimate bloodlines. And that's what makes this revelation explosive. It doesn't just question a family, it questions a nation's foundation. Yet behind all the legal implications lies something more human, Diana's ghost. The echoes of her pain, her secrets, her unspoken truths. She warned of being silenced. She warned that people within the system would never allow me to be happy. And in the years since her tragic death, it feels as though the shadow of what she left behind has finally come to collect its due. Could it be that the secret Diana feared would destroy everything is now coming to light? When King Charles ascended the throne, the world saw a monarch finally stepping into his destiny. But for William, it was the beginning of questions he didn't know he'd have to face. People close to the family describe a growing distance between father and son in the months following Charles's coronation. A tension that wasn't visible on camera, but was palpable in private. William began spending less time at royal residences and more time away with his wife and children. Some say it was about privacy. Others now believe it was something deeper, a search for truth. And then came the courier, the envelope, the DNA report that would detonate everything. It said that William was alone when he opened it. No aides, no advisors, no cameras. Just him and a sheet of paper that changed his life. His reaction? Silence. Complete silence for several minutes. Then disbelief. Then fury. The first call he made wasn't to his wife, Kate. It was to the king. That conversation, according to those inside Balmoral, turned from calm to catastrophic in minutes. Charles tried to reason. William demanded answers. Camilla intervened, pleading for calm. But William's voice broke through the corridors like thunder. "You knew," he shouted. "You've known this my entire life." And in that moment, the air inside Balmoral grew so heavy that even the guards outside could feel it. For the first time in modern history, the royal family wasn't united. It was splintering from within. What's worse, there are rumors that this confrontation was recorded. Not intentionally, but by palace security cameras and staff intercom systems. If that footage were ever to leak, it could be the most damaging scandal in the monarchy's history. Because it wouldn't just expose family secrets. It would show a prince stripped of everything he believed in. So here we are. The palace remains silent. Officially, no statement has been released. But sources insist the DNA results are real. They've been verified by an independent lab. And now, the palace's only goal is containment. But truth has a way of escaping, doesn't it? It always finds the cracks. What happens next will determine not just the fate of one family, but the entire royal institution. Will the monarchy survive this? Can it afford to? And if William truly isn't Charles's son, who is his real father? These are the questions haunting the palace tonight. And as the pieces come together, one thing becomes clear. This is no longer about inheritance. It's about identity. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free. It destroys everything you thought you knew. But the real shock hasn't even arrived yet. Because the person who orchestrated this DNA test wasn't William. It wasn't the king. It wasn't even an enemy of the crown. It was someone from Diana's past. Someone determined to make sure the truth finally saw daylight. And when that truth came out, it didn't just leave William broken. It left him screaming. What happened next would shake the monarchy to its core and expose the secret project that had been buried for decades inside Buckingham Palace itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It was just past 10:47 p.m. when the knock came. Not the polite tap of a servant, not the hesitant brush of a visitor, but a single, deliberate knock. One that echoed through the quiet corridors of Kensington Palace like a warning. Prince William had just finished reading bedtime stories to George and Charlotte. The house was still. Only the faint hum of the radiator filled the air. He was about to switch off the lamp when his private aide appeared at the door, pale, hesitant, clutching a thin, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. "For your eyes only, sir." That was all he said before vanishing down the hall. William stared at the envelope for a long moment. No royal crest. No return address. Just his name, written in black ink, firm and deliberate. Something about the handwriting felt official, almost medical. His first thought was that it might be related to one of his charities, or perhaps an internal palace audit. But the weight of the paper told another story. It was heavy, important, secret, and when he turned it over, the seal caught the light. A symbol he hadn't seen since his mother's death. The discreet insignia of St. Mary's Hospital's Private Records Division. His heartbeat quickened. He sat down at his desk, the same one where he'd once written thank you letters as a schoolboy. The same desk where Diana had taught him to write, her hand guiding his. Now that memory felt like a ghost hovering behind him. He slid a finger under the wax and broke the seal. The sound was small, but final, the sound of something that could never be undone. Inside were 2 sheets of paper and a single photograph. The photograph was old, worn at the edges. It showed a man in a royal security uniform standing beside a young Diana. His expression was kind, protective. Her smile, soft and private. William had seen that face before, in the background of old tabloid photos, in whispered conversations among palace staff. Very monarchy. The Mansom called her confidant. Others called her downfall. William's chest tightened. His eyes moved to the top of the document. Royal Genetic Comparison Analysis, 2024, Restricted Access. A chill crawled up his spine. He read the first line once, then again, and again. Subject A, William Arthur Philip Lewis. Biological sample comparison result. Inconclusive match with Subject B, Charles Philip Arthur George. 99.98% confirmed match with Subject C, Barry Manicky, deceased. The words blurred for a moment as his pulse pounded in his ears. Inconclusive match. Confirmed match. Manicky. He pushed back from the desk, so fast his chair hit the wall. His breath came short, shallow. He rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. No, it couldn't be. Someone had to be playing a cruel trick. Maybe it was fabricated. A hoax. Maybe some journalist had managed to get hold of old rumors and repackage them as truth. But the header, the formatting, the internal reference numbers, all of it was real. It was the same structure used in the palace's confidential health correspondences. And at the bottom, stamped in blue, was a seal he recognized instantly. Clarence House, Internal Verification Department. That was his father's office. William's stomach turned cold. He sank into his chair, staring at the paper, unable to move. The air seemed thinner now, harder to breathe. He flipped to the second page. There it was again, official notation, signature line, verification from a senior royal physician. And next to the signature, a date, 1982. That was the year of his birth. William's hands trembled as he pressed his palms against the desk. How long had this existed? How long had someone known? He glanced again at the photo of Diana and Manicky. His mother's expression wasn't one of fear or caution. It was warmth, trust, almost love. He whispered, barely audible, "Mum, what did you do?" But the words disappeared into the silence of the room. For several minutes, he didn't move. He just stared at the papers, the way a man might stare at his own reflection in shattered glass. Pieces of his identity lay scattered in front of him, and he wasn't sure which part to pick up first. Then came the anger. It started slow, a faint tremor in his hands, a heat behind his eyes. Then it built into a storm. His pulse thundered. His jaw clenched. His fists tightened around the paper until the edges tore. He felt the betrayal crawl through him like fire. Every moment, every word, every memory with his father suddenly felt distorted. The comforting hand on his shoulder, the laughter, the long talks about duty and destiny. Were they all lies? He stood up abruptly, pacing the room. The walls seemed to close in on him. He thought of Kate, her face, her trust, her belief in the royal legacy they were building together. What would she think if she knew? What would their children think one day? And worse, what would the world think if they found out the next king of England wasn't royal by blood? He grabbed his phone and stared at it for several seconds before finally dialing. His hands were shaking. He didn't even know what he would say, or if he wanted to hear the answer. The line rang once, twice. Then a calm, weary voice answered. "William? It's late. Is everything all right?" The voice of King Charles III. For a moment, William couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but no words came out. All the fury, the confusion, the heartbreak crashed together until it felt like his chest might explode. Finally, his voice broke through, raw and shaking. "Did you know?" A pause. "Know what, my boy?" Charles replied, his tone cautious, almost rehearsed. "Don't do that," William said, his voice rising. "Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. Did you know about this?" He could hear Charles inhale sharply through the receiver. Silence stretched. "William, whatever you've been told. Answer me." William's voice cracked with emotion. "Is it true? Is it true that you're not my father?" The silence on the line lasted 5 full seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When Charles finally spoke, his voice was slow, trembling. "There are things, William, that you may never understand." "Stop," William shouted. "Don't you dare lecture me about understanding. I trusted you." A loud crash echoed as his fist slammed the desk. One of the picture frames, a photo of him, Charles, and Harry from years ago, fell and shattered on the floor. The voice on the phone grew quieter, almost pleading. "Listen to me, please. I have always loved you. You are my son in every way that matters." "Then why does this say otherwise?" William shouted, waving the paper though no one could see him. "Why does this report exist? Why has this been hidden my entire life?" Charles said nothing. Only shallow breathing could be heard through the receiver. Finally, William spoke again. This time, lower, colder. "You knew?" A faint tremor cracked through Charles's reply. "It wasn't my choice." That sentence hit William like a dagger. Not a denial. Not even surprise. Just resignation. He hung up. For a long moment, he just stood there, gripping the phone, staring at nothing. His heart pounded so hard it felt like thunder in his chest. He picked up the document again, rereading it, hoping the words would somehow change. But they didn't. The truth stayed printed in black ink, unmovable. And that's when he noticed something he hadn't before, a faint watermark on the back page. It wasn't hospital stationery. It was government-issued. MI5. William froze. What was an intelligence agency doing with his DNA results? He turned the page over, scanning for more clues. In the lower corner was a phrase typed in small, faded print. Project Phoenix, Phase 2. The words meant nothing to him, but they sent a chill through his body. He pressed the papers against his chest and leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. Everything suddenly felt orchestrated, his entire life a carefully managed illusion. He thought of his mother again, her warnings about forces within the system. She tried to tell him. And now, her voice from an old recording played in his memory. There are people who will never let the truth come out. Maybe she wasn't paranoid after all. He rose slowly, pacing toward the window. The night outside was calm. London slept beneath a silver mist. But inside, everything was chaos. He felt hollow, weightless, disconnected from his own reflection in the glass. Was he still a prince? Or just a pawn in someone else's royal game? His phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "You were never supposed to see that." William's throat tightened. He looked around the dark room as if someone might be watching. He typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. He called again. No answer. And then, from the hallway, a faint creak. A shadow moved just outside his door. He froze, listening. A moment later, the noise disappeared, and the house fell silent once more. He returned to his desk, gathering the papers. His instincts told him to burn them, destroy everything. But something inside him refused. He needed to know more. He needed to see where this led. He locked the envelope inside the bottom drawer and turned the key. Outside, the London clock tower struck midnight. William sat on the edge of his bed, staring into the darkness. Sleep wouldn't come. His mind raced. Questions, memories, anger. He thought of his children, their innocent faces. What kind of future would they inherit if this truth came out? And yet, another thought whispered beneath the noise. Maybe the truth was the only way to free them from the same lies that had trapped his mother. He whispered into the dark, "I'll find out. No matter what it costs." Down the hall, a clock ticked softly. And somewhere, far away, in the quiet of Balmoral Castle, King Charles sat awake, staring at his own copy of the same report. The candle beside him flickered. His expression was grim, resigned. He knew the storm had begun. Because once the truth enters the palace walls, it never stays buried for long. And the next time father and son would speak, it wouldn't be over the phone. It would be face to face. And when that moment came, it wouldn't end with words. It would end with a scream. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The next morning, the air over Balmoral Castle felt heavy, almost electric. Thick clouds loomed above the Scottish Highlands, and mist clung to the hills like a veil. But inside the castle walls, something colder was brewing. King Charles sat alone in his study. The fire had gone out hours ago, but he hadn't noticed. In front of him lay the same document that had arrived at Kensington Palace the night before, the same report that now sat like a curse between father and son. He'd read it dozens of times, though he didn't need to. Every word was seared into his memory. He'd spent years fearing this moment, and now it had arrived, silently, brutally, without mercy. The sound of the double doors opening snapped him back. William walked in. He wasn't dressed for ceremony. No tailored suit, no polished shoes. Just a dark sweater, sleeves rolled up, eyes hollow and red from a sleepless night. "Close the doors," he said quietly. The footman hesitated, then obeyed. The click of the latch echoed through the room. Charles rose slowly, the weight of years visible in his shoulders. "William," he began, voice soft. "We need to talk about—" "No," William interrupted. "You need to explain." The tension was instant. Sharp. You could almost feel the temperature drop. Charles gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Please, sit down." But William didn't move. His hands were trembling slightly, but his voice, when it came, was steady, almost too calm. "How long have you known?" Charles exhaled, looking down. "It's not that simple." "Don't you dare," William snapped. "Don't tell me it's not simple. It's a yes or no question. How long have you known that I'm not your biological son?" Charles's eyes closed briefly. When he looked up again, there was something old and tired in his expression, the look of a man haunted by choices made decades ago. "Since you were a child," he admitted. The words landed like a hammer. William blinked, as if he hadn't heard right. "Since I was a child?" His voice cracked. "And you just carried on? You smiled at me, called me your son, gave speeches about duty and legacy while knowing." "It was never about deception," Charles interrupted, his voice breaking slightly. "It was about protection." "Protection for who?" William shouted. "For me? Or for you?" The echo filled the study. Paintings of long-dead monarchs looked down from the walls as if witnessing a betrayal centuries in the making. Charles moved closer. "I loved your mother," he said softly. "In my own way, perhaps not the way she needed. But when things with Barry became complicated, I had to make a choice. A painful one. To protect you. To protect the crown." William laughed bitterly. "You mean to protect your image?" "William, please. Don't." He slammed his fist against the desk, startling his father. "You let me live my entire life believing I was your blood. You let me stand beside you at the coronation, look into your eyes, and swear loyalty to you, all while knowing the truth." Charles's voice trembled now. "I didn't want to lose you." "You never had me," William whispered. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind howling against the window. Charles tried to reach out, but William stepped back. "Tell me one thing," he said. "Did Mother know?" Charles hesitated. That was enough of an answer. William's throat tightened. "So she knew, and she never said anything?" She wanted to, Charles said quietly. But she was scared. She believed the truth would destroy you. William's jaw clenched. She was right. He turned away, pacing toward the window. His reflection stared back at him, a face the world recognized, but he no longer did. He pressed a hand against the glass, his voice shaking. Do you know what this means, Father? If this ever gets out, if this report is real, I can't be king. I can't even stand in line for the throne. Charles's reply was barely audible. That's why it had to stay buried. William turned sharply. Buried? That's what you call it. A lie hidden behind palace walls. Charles lowered his gaze. I did what I thought was necessary. You must understand, the monarchy depends on stability, on the illusion of perfection. One fracture in the bloodline, and it all crumbles. William stared at him in disbelief. So, I was your illusion. Charles looked at him helplessly. You were my son. No, William said coldly. I was your cover story. The words hit harder than either of them expected. Charles's eyes glistened, but he held his composure. You can hate me if you must. But remember, love and duty are rarely the same thing in this family. William took a step forward, voice trembling with fury. Then maybe this family should stop pretending it's built on love at all. The silence that followed was unbearable. For a brief moment, Charles looked older than his years, frail, small, surrounded by relics of power that suddenly meant nothing. You think I wanted this, he whispered. You think I wanted your mother to be in pain? I tried to make peace with her before she died. But by then, it was too late. The system had taken control. Everything had to appear perfect, even if it meant living a lie. William's tone softened slightly, but the anger remained. The system, the crown, the duty. It's always an excuse, isn't it? You hide behind it to justify everything. But this is different. This is personal. He looked down at the papers still on the desk. How did this test even resurface? Charles hesitated again, and this time, the pause gave him away. You know who sent it to me, don't you? William said. Charles turned toward the fireplace, his back to his son. There are people who've waited years for this moment. People who still worship your mother's memory and despise what the institution did to her. They've been looking for proof. Someone found it. Who? Charles's silence was all the answer William needed. Someone inside the palace, he said quietly. A faint nod. William's chest tightened. So even now, even after all this time, the palace is still eating itself alive. Charles spoke softly, almost to himself. The truth is dangerous when it doesn't fit the narrative. William stared at him for a long time. You really believe that, don't you? That lies are safer than truth. Charles met his gaze. In our world, they have to be. William's voice broke. Then maybe I don't want to live in your world anymore. He turned toward the door. Charles's voice followed him, desperate, pleading. William, don't walk away like this. You don't understand what's at stake. William stopped, hand on the door handle. You're right. I don't. Because for once, I'm not thinking about what's at stake for the crown. I'm thinking about what's left of my family. He opened the door and walked out. The echo of his footsteps faded down the hall, leaving the king alone in the silent room. Charles sank into his chair, staring at the broken frame of their old photograph. He reached for it, running his fingers across the cracked glass. My son, he whispered, forgive me. But forgiveness wasn't coming. Outside the study, the palace staff moved like ghosts, quiet, cautious, pretending not to notice the sound of raised voices echoing earlier through the halls. Rumors had already begun to ripple through the household. Some said the prince shouted. Others swore they heard the king's voice trembling. That night, William returned to Kensington Palace without speaking to anyone. He went straight to his office, locked the door, and pulled the envelope from the drawer again. He stared at it for a long time. The symbol, the stamp, the dates. He poured himself a drink and sat in the dark, thinking about his children. What would he tell them one day? How could he explain that their grandfather might not be their bloodline? That their royal destiny was built on deceit? His phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. This time, the message was longer. Your mother wanted you to know. Look for the name Martin Goodwin. William frowned. The name meant nothing to him. But whoever was sending these messages wasn't guessing. They knew details. Intimate ones. He wrote back. Who are you? The reply came instantly. Someone who was there when she cried for help. A chill ran down his spine. He typed again, what do you want? But the sender had already gone silent. He looked at the message again, rereading the name, Martin Goodwin. It sounded familiar, distant, buried in some memory of palace chatter or an old hospital file. He opened his laptop and typed the name. The results loaded slowly. Old medical journals, press releases, and then an obituary. Dr. Martin Goodwin, former royal physician, St. Mary's Hospital. Died 2003. Cause of death, unknown. William leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. First his father. Now this. Another dead man linked to secrets he didn't understand. He scrolled further down the article. There, hidden among the comments, was a short anonymous post. He knew about Phoenix. That word again. Phoenix. He shut the laptop, heart pounding. The walls of his office suddenly felt too close. He stood up, pacing. He needed answers, real ones. Not the half-truths his father gave him. Not the whispers of courtiers protecting their image. He needed to know what Phoenix was, and why his DNA was part of it. The next morning, he made a decision. He would find whoever was behind those messages. And he would start with the one place where secrets like this always end up, the palace archives. Because if the king wouldn't tell him the truth, then he would dig it up himself. And what he was about to uncover would make the DNA revelation look like the beginning of something much darker. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The sun hadn't yet risen over London when Prince William stepped out of Kensington Palace. The morning air was sharp, biting, heavy with fog, the kind that made even the city's familiar streets feel foreign. His driver waited silently by the car, not asking questions, not daring to. William slid into the back seat without a word. The destination was already known. The palace archives. For most, that building was just another stone fortress near Buckingham. Old, quiet, mostly forgotten. But to those inside the royal circle, it was sacred ground. It held the secrets of the crown. Birth certificates, medical files, letters marked eyes only. Records that could either preserve a legacy or destroy one. Today, William wasn't a prince. He was a man on a mission to find out who had lied to him and why. The car rolled through the gates just after dawn. The guards, surprised to see him, hesitated before saluting. No one questioned his sudden arrival. That was the advantage of being royal. Even when you were unraveling, no one dared ask why. Inside, the corridors smelled of old paper and dust. The walls were lined with portraits of royal doctors, archivists, and keepers, men who had built their careers on silence. At the far end stood a door with a brass nameplate. Dr. Martin Goodwin, Royal Medical Division, deceased. William stared at it for a long moment before turning the handle. The office had been untouched for years. Dust coated every surface. The faint scent of formaldehyde still lingered in the air, mixed with old tobacco. On the desk, stacks of yellowed files leaned like forgotten tombstones. He closed the door behind him and exhaled. The name from the message, Martin Goodwin, echoed in his mind. The royal physician who'd served both Charles and Diana. The man who'd been there when William was born. He began scanning the drawers, opening each one carefully. The files were organized alphabetically, until they weren't. Some sections were missing. Others misfiled intentionally, perhaps to throw off anyone looking too closely. Then he saw it. A folder marked simply PHX. Project Phoenix. His hand froze over it. He opened it slowly, as if afraid of what might leap out. Inside were several envelopes, some sealed, others torn open. The first page bore the St. Mary's Hospital insignia, along with the words Royal Genetic Program, Confidential. The document detailed an initiative commissioned in 1982, the year of his birth. The purpose? To ensure biological verification of royal lineage in response to potential external claims. External claims. William's chest tightened. They had tested him even then, before he could speak, before he could crawl, because someone already doubted who his father was. He turned another page. Typed in neat, bureaucratic language were the signatures of 3 individuals: Dr. Martin Goodwin, Sir Robert Fellows, then the Queen's private secretary, and someone else. Initials only, CPAG, Charles Philip Arthur George. His father. William stared at the initials for a long time, numb. Charles hadn't just known, he had authorized it. He flipped further. There was a smaller envelope attached to the back, labeled Supplemental, Monarchy Blood Sample. He hesitated, hands trembling. How did Monarchy's sample end up in a royal file? Why was it even taken? He tore it open. Inside were typed lab results dated May 1986. Monarchy sample extracted posthumously under directive PHX 12. Cross-comparison to royal subject A ongoing. Posthumously, they had tested Monarchy's blood after his death and compared it to William's. He sat back, stunned. Every boundary of privacy, of decency, had been crossed, all to hide one truth. He whispered to himself, they knew all along. His phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Another message. Be careful. They're watching you. He looked around, suddenly aware of the surveillance cameras in the corners. He quickly snapped photos of the documents with his phone, slid the files back, and shut the drawer. As he turned to leave, the office door creaked open. Your Highness. William spun around, heart racing. A woman stood in the doorway, perhaps in her 60s, wearing a gray archivist's coat. Her name tag read Margaret Linton. He tried to steady his breathing. You startled me. I'm sorry, sir, she said quietly. I didn't know anyone was here this early. Her eyes dropped to the folder in his hand. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. You found Dr. Goodwin's files. William hesitated. You knew him? A faint, sad smile. Everyone in the medical wing knew him. Brilliant man. Loyal to a fault. But he asked too many questions near the end. What kind of questions? Margaret looked toward the hall before stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Questions about blood samples that didn't match. About orders that came from places even he couldn't question. He was told to destroy evidence. Instead, he hid some of it here. William's pulse quickened. He hid it? Why? Because he knew one day you'd come looking, she said simply. The words sent a chill down his spine. Mrs. Linton, he said, lowering his voice. Do you know what Project Phoenix was? She hesitated, eyes glancing at the door again. It was supposed to be a contingency plan, to maintain royal legitimacy if things went wrong. Every royal birth after your mother's was to be tested. But when your mother's results came back, there were inconsistencies. William frowned. Inconsistencies. Your DNA? She whispered. It didn't match Prince Charles's completely. Only partially. The rest matched another profile. He felt the ground tilt beneath him. She continued, voice trembling. Goodwin wanted to tell your mother. But the order came from above, the Queen's office. He was threatened with dismissal, stripped of access, and eventually silenced. William's voice grew quiet. You mean killed? Margaret didn't answer. Her silence said everything. He took a step closer. Why are you telling me this? Her eyes softened. Because Diana was kind to me. She once told me she feared for you. Said, they'll turn him into one of them if the truth never comes out. She was right. You deserve to know. William's throat tightened. Then help me. What else did Goodwin leave behind? Margaret reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small key. Old, tarnished, brass. She pressed it into his hand. There's a storage compartment beneath the archives. Restricted access. Use this. But go alone. Why me? Because if anyone else finds it, it disappears forever. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. Be careful, Your Highness. The palace protects its own secrets, even from you. William watched her disappear down the corridor. The key felt heavy in his palm, as though it carried the weight of his entire life. He left the office quietly, making his way down the narrow stone staircase that led to the basement. The air grew colder with each step. A low hum of old machinery echoed through the hall. He reached the metal door marked, Authorized Personnel Only. The key fit perfectly. Inside, rows of locked cabinets lined the walls. Dust motes floated through the beam of his flashlight. He searched until he found one labeled G/PHX storage. He turned the key again. The door opened with a metallic groan. Inside were dozens of small boxes, each marked with initials. WAPL, William Arthur Philip Lewis. HCM, Henry Charles Mountbatten. Others too. Files, vials, sealed envelopes. Generations of royal DNA archived like specimens. He felt sick. This wasn't just his family, it was everyone. Every royal child cataloged, tracked, and tested. All for one purpose, to preserve a lie. He lifted one of the boxes and opened it. Inside was a vial labeled Sample A, 1982. A blood sample. His. Beside it, another labeled Sample C, Monarchy, 1986. He stared at them. 2 vials, 2 lives, one secret binding them together. He climbed the stairs quickly, emerging into daylight. But the moment he stepped outside, he noticed a man standing near the gate. Black coat, dark glasses, watching. When William met his gaze, the man turned away, speaking into a small earpiece before disappearing into a waiting car. William's pulse pounded. He got into his own vehicle and slammed the door. His driver looked back nervously. "Where to, sir?" William hesitated, then said quietly, "Home." As the car pulled away, he looked down at the note in his hand again. One line stood out above all others. "Never trust the archives. The truth lies elsewhere, under Phoenix." He whispered the word again to himself. Phoenix. Whatever it wasn't just a project. It was the root of everything. And if Dr. Goodwin had died for uncovering it, William knew one thing for certain. He was next in line for the same fate if he wasn't careful. But he wasn't turning back now, because this wasn't just about uncovering who his real father was anymore. It was about tearing down the walls of deceit that had protected the monarchy for generations. And the first brick had already fallen. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The drive back to Kensington Palace was silent. The tires hissed against the wet London pavement, and the rain blurred the city lights into streaks of gold and gray. William sat in the back seat, gripping the note from Dr. Goodwin like a lifeline. Never trust the archives. The truth lies elsewhere, under Phoenix. The words played on repeat in his mind. He felt like a man chasing a ghost, his mother's ghost. Every revelation pulled him closer to her world, her fears, her whispers about men in suits, and forces working against her. Things that once sounded like paranoia now felt like prophecy. But one detail in those old files refused to leave his mind. 2 letters scribbled across multiple documents. BM. They weren't just initials. They were the key. That night, after putting his children to bed, William returned to his study. The palace was quiet. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. It fell steadily against the windows, a rhythmic sound that seemed to echo his heartbeat. He opened his laptop and typed into the search bar, BM Royal Connection 1980s. Dozens of results appeared, tabloids, old biographies, conspiracy forums. But one article, buried deep in the archives of a 1997 newspaper, caught his eye. The bodyguard Diana couldn't forget. The headline was simple. The photo beside it wasn't. It showed his mother, Princess Diana, standing beside a man, tall, broad-shouldered, kind eyes beneath a fringe of brown hair. His name, Barry Manicky. William leaned closer. The resemblance was faint, but undeniable. The same jawline, the same gentle seriousness in his eyes. He scrolled further. The article described how Manicky had served as Diana's bodyguard from 1985 to 1986. He was dismissed under internal disciplinary reasons after rumors of an inappropriate closeness. Weeks later, he died in a motorcycle accident. But something about that accident never sat right. Not with Diana, and now not with her son. The report said his motorcycle was struck by a car that was never identified. The driver vanished. Witnesses described it as an orchestrated hit, though police ruled it an accident. Diana had once told her voice coach, "I was deeply in love with him." They got rid of him. William's breath caught in his throat. He'd heard that quote before, once, long ago, during a documentary. But he'd brushed it off then as gossip. Now, it felt like a confession from beyond the grave. He whispered the name to himself, slowly. Barry Manicky. He pulled out the photographs he'd taken earlier from Goodwin's files. On one of the pages, faintly typed, were those same initials, BM, and beside them, a number, PChex 12. Project Phoenix, Phase 12. His chest tightened. He opened another browser tab, searching for anything that might connect Manicky to the Royal Medical Division. At first, nothing. Then, a small mention buried in a police inquiry summary. Body of deceased, Manicky, transferred post-mortem under government authorization to undisclosed facility. Undisclosed facility. William pushed back from his desk. That was no ordinary death investigation. That was cover-up language. He grabbed his coat. Within minutes, he was in his car again, heading through the rain toward the old government storage building near Westminster, a facility often used for classified evidence transfers. When he arrived, he flashed his royal identification. The guard recognized him instantly, hesitated, and then nodded him through. Inside, the building was sterile and silent. Rows of steel lockers stretched endlessly under fluorescent lights. A young clerk escorted him toward the back. I was told to expect someone from the palace. The clerk said nervously. You're here for the 1986 file? William stopped walking. How did you know that? The man shrugged. Orders came through an hour ago. Someone higher up said you might request it. William's pulse quickened. Who? But the clerk only shook his head. We don't get names. Just signatures. They reached the final row. The man stopped at a locker marked, classified, 1986, monarchy. William's breath caught. The lock had already been broken. He opened it. Inside was an empty folder. He stared into the void of the locker, disbelief tightening his throat. Where is it? The clerk looked pale. That file was checked out yesterday, sir. By someone using royal authorization. Who signed it out? The clerk swallowed hard. Initials CPAG. Charles Philip Arthur George. William's eyes darkened. His father had taken it. He left the facility without another word. The rain hit harder now, splashing against his windshield like shards of glass. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His father wasn't just hiding from him. He was erasing evidence in real time. When he got home, he went straight to his office, locked the door, and pulled out the old photo of Diana and Manaki again. His mother's smile was different in that picture, softer, freer. He traced her face with his thumb. He remembered being a child, sitting in her lap while she hummed lullabies. The warmth of her arms. The way she always whispered, "You're my brave boy." Now he wondered if those words carried more weight than he ever realized. Did she know? Did she know he wasn't Charles's son? Did she die protecting that truth? His phone buzzed again. Same number. BM was more than her protector. He was her escape. William typed furiously. Who are you? The reply came seconds later. Someone who helped her survive. Before they silenced her. He froze. Then another message appeared. If you want proof, go to the old royal stables at Sandringham. Look beneath the east wall. You'll find what she left behind. William's heart pounded. He'd been to Sandringham countless times, but never once had he imagined it hid secrets buried by his own mother. The next morning, before dawn, he drove there alone. No security detail. No aides. Just him, the fog, and the voice of his mother echoing in memory. The stables were old, long and used, the wood damp from decades of rain. The air smelled of hay and nostalgia. He moved toward the east wall, scanning for anything unusual. Then he saw it. A small, uneven section of brick near the base, slightly different in color. He knelt and pressed against it. The brick loosened. Behind it, a small metal box was wedged into the wall cavity. His hands trembled as he pulled it out. The lid was rusted, sealed with wax. He pried it open. Inside were 2 envelopes and a small cassette tape. He opened the first envelope. Inside was a note, handwritten in Diana's elegant script. My darling boy, if you found this, then I'm gone. They won't let the truth live. I try to protect you from it. But one day, you'll need to know why everything happened the way it did. The man they said was my bodyguard was my only friend, and the only person who ever truly loved me. They took him because of it. And one day, they'll try to take you too. William's hands shook as he read the next line. Trust no one inside the palace. And if you ever see the word Phoenix, know that it means rebirth through fire. They burned our truth once. Don't let them do it again. Tears stung his eyes. He turned to the second envelope. It contained a photo, an ultrasound image. The date printed on the bottom read 1981. At the top, written in Diana's hand, my first miracle. William clutched the paper against his chest, his breath breaking. His mother had hidden this for him. She'd known he would come looking one day. He pulled out the cassette tape, an old dictaphone recording. There was a label, for William. Recorded April 1997. He found an old player in the maintenance shed nearby and pressed play. Static crackled. Then her voice filled the air, soft, trembling, unmistakable. If you're hearing this, it means I was right. I'm being followed, watched. I don't think I'll make it out alive. But I need you to remember that love, real love, isn't bound by blood. They'll tell you lies about your father, about me, about everything. Don't hate them, but don't trust them either. A pause. Then, faintly, you were born from love, my darling. That's what makes you royal, not a crown. The tape clicked off. William sat there in silence, the sound of the rain mingling with his mother's ghost. He didn't move for a long time. When he finally stood, he pocketed the tape and the note. The rain had stopped. The clouds above the estate began to part. letting in the faintest shimmer of sunlight. For the first time since the envelope arrived, he didn't feel confusion. He felt resolve. His mother's truth had survived, buried under brick and silence. And now, so would he. He whispered to the air, "I'll finish what you started, Mom." But as he turned to leave, headlights appeared at the end of the long gravel path. 2 black cars, tinted windows. He froze. No insignia, no plates. Just silence and movement. He slipped the box inside his coat and backed into the shadows of the stable. The cars stopped. 2 men stepped out. Suits. Earpieces. Palace security. One of them spoke into his wrist mic. Target confirmed. He found it. William's pulse raced. How did they know he was here? He moved through the side door, heart pounding, and disappeared into the woods behind the estate. Behind him, the men entered the stable. Within minutes, one of them spoke again. "The box is gone." The other cursed under his breath. "He's onto it. We need to inform Clarence House." William didn't hear the rest. He was already gone, soaked, breathless, and burning with fury. Because now it was clear, the people trying to silence his mother were still inside the palace, and still watching him. And the deeper he went, the more he'd uncover the one truth the monarchy feared most. That blood doesn't just bind, it betrays. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The wind roared through the trees as William made his way down the muddy path behind Sandringham. His breath came in short, sharp bursts, and the rain had turned the ground into a slick mess of puddles and roots. But he didn't care. Every step pulled him further from the palace that raised him, and closer to the truth his mother had died protecting. By the time he reached the road, his phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls from unknown numbers. Messages from aides begging for his location. He ignored them all. He flagged down a passing car, an old farmer's pickup, and offered a wad of cash to take him to the nearest train station. The driver didn't recognize him at first, mud-streaked, hood pulled low. Just another traveler in a storm. But when the man finally glanced over, realization flickered in his eyes. He said nothing. He didn't need to. There was something in William's expression that told him this was no ordinary royal errand. For the entire ride, William's mind replayed his mother's voice from that cassette. The softness, the sorrow, the warning. She had loved someone. Truly, deeply, in a way that defied everything royal life demanded. And that love, not scandal, not rebellion, but love, had cost both of them their lives as they knew them. Barry Manicky. The name haunted him now. Who was this man beyond the headlines? Beyond the whispers? What had his mother seen in him that she hadn't seen in Charles? When he arrived back in London, William headed straight to a private library that specialized in declassified archives. There, he requested every file, every record, every scrap of information on Barry Manicky. The clerk, confused by the unusual request coming from a prince himself, hesitated. "Sir, most of these records were sealed after the 1997 inquest into your mother's death." "Then find the ones that aren't," William said quietly. Hours passed. The room filled with the sound of shuffling paper and humming lights. And then, finally, a name emerged. An address, a birth certificate, a service record from the Royal Protection Command. Barry Manicky had joined the Metropolitan Police in 1973, assigned to Royal Protection in 1985. Within months, reports surfaced that he'd become overly familiar with the Princess of Wales. The word inappropriate appeared repeatedly in his file, though no evidence of misconduct existed. Still, he was removed from duty in 1986. Weeks later, dead. William leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. The timeline was too neat. Too convenient. He read deeper into the file. One entry stood out. A disciplinary note written by a superior officer. Subject exhibits personal concern for HRH beyond professional requirement. Reports indicate emotional involvement. Emotional involvement. William's pulse quickened. He turned the page. Attached was an unsigned memo written in 1986. If this continues, the stability of the royal household could be compromised. Recommend immediate reassignment and containment. Containment. The word reeked of threat. He kept reading, his eyes widening with each paragraph. There it was again, Project Phoenix. It appeared in the margins, handwritten next to Manicky's name. So even then, the same shadow operation existed. The same program that tested blood, tracked genetics, and erased anything that didn't fit the narrative. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. He pulled out his phone and stared at the note from Goodwin again. The truth lies elsewhere. Under Phoenix. But now, another pattern was emerging. Monarchy wasn't just the secret. He was the spark. Phoenix wasn't just about verifying bloodlines. It was about controlling them. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. The same number. Stop digging, the message read. They're already moving against you. William's jaw tightened. He typed back. Tell me who you are. The reply came almost instantly. Someone who loved your mother too. The words hung there, chilling and cryptic. He set the phone down and leaned forward, burying his face in his hands. He could feel the weight of everything. His mother's loneliness, her desperation for affection, the betrayal she faced at every turn. He thought of the stories she'd told him as a child, about kindness, about honesty, about never letting others define who you are. And yet, she had lived surrounded by people who defined everything for her, who told her how to smile, when to speak, whom to love, and whom to lose. He imagined her in 1985, a young woman trapped in a loveless marriage, eyes full of dreams and pain. And then, this man, Barry, the one person who didn't treat her like a symbol, but like a woman. He could almost see it. Late nights at Kensington Palace. Whispered conversations in the hallway. The way she must have laughed again after so long without reason to. Maybe it wasn't scandal at all. Maybe it was salvation. But love like that, in a world built on control, was never meant to survive. And maybe that's why they made sure it didn't. As he read on, one particular statement from an unnamed palace source caught his attention. There were concerns that the princess had formed a dependency on her bodyguard. The relationship was becoming dangerously intimate. Dangerously intimate. That phrase said everything without saying anything. It was the same language bureaucrats use to sanitize emotional crimes. Then came the final line in the file, stamped, read, official, terminate assignment. Ensure discretion. Close record. 3 weeks later, Barry Monarchy was dead. William exhaled shakily. He rubbed his temples, staring at the words until they blurred. Was his mother's love affair truly a threat to the monarchy, or just a threat to those who depended on her silence? He looked back at her letter. They took him because of it. And one day, they'll try to take you too. The thought sent a shiver through him. They had already tried to erase her. Would they do the same to him now that he was uncovering what she couldn't hide anymore? The librarian approached quietly. Sir, I think you should see this, she said, holding a dusty envelope. It was filed under restricted correspondence, but it bears your mother's initials. William took it. His hands trembled as he tore it open. Inside was a short note written in Diana's unmistakable handwriting. It wasn't addressed to anyone, more like a diary entry torn from a journal. Barry said he'd protect me, but they're watching. I can't tell Charles. He'd destroy him. I think they know about the baby. God help me if they find out. The paper slipped from William's hand. The baby. He read it again, heart pounding. She hadn't written children. She'd written baby. Singular. Was she referring to him? Or someone else? His hands shook. He grabbed his phone, typing a message to the unknown number. What did she mean by the baby? The reply came seconds later. Ask yourself why you never saw a DNA confirmation at birth. He froze. He whispered to himself. They switched the results. He could almost see it now, the night he was born. The hospital staff moving quickly, the photographers waiting outside, the doctors exchanging sealed envelopes under the cover of royal protocol. A substitution, a manipulation, a secret buried before it ever saw daylight. He felt rage boil inside him, not just for himself, but for her, for the life she was denied, for the love she was punished for. He stood and looked out the library window. The city below was alive, people going about their ordinary days, oblivious to the storm brewing above them. He whispered, They took everything from you, Mom, but they won't take this truth. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his coat. That night, he returned home and sat by the window, listening to the rain. His wife, Kate, peeked in softly. You haven't slept, she said gently. He looked up at her, eyes weary. Do you ever wonder how much of what we're told to protect is actually real? Kate frowned. What do you mean? Everything. The traditions, the stories, the faces we show the world. What if it's all built on lies? She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then tell the truth. He looked at her, searching her face for doubt. There was none. She meant it. For a moment, the storm inside him eased. But deep down, he knew telling the truth meant war. Not with tabloids. Not with gossip. With the crown itself. Because if the world learned that the heir to the throne wasn't truly of royal blood, the monarchy wouldn't just crack, it would crumble.